We have 2.5 minutes until the end of the world. So why are you watching this video? Humanity is now 30 seconds closer to annihilation, according to scientists. The Doomsday Clock is a symbolic warning about how close the world is to existential or nuclear catastrophe, and the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists announced that humanity is facing the greatest dangers since the Cold War. The minute hand is now 2.5 minutes to midnight, when the world ends. Climate change, nuclear threats, and other emerging dangers, such as fake news and cyber terrorism, factor into where scientists set the clock. Our safest time was 1991, when we had a whole 17 minutes until destruction. The closest we've come to our theoretical destruction came in 1953, when both the US and the Soviet Union tested their first thermonuclear weapons. The only time in 64 years it's been closer than it is now. Scientists confirm that Vladimir Putin and Donald Trump's loose nuclear rhetoric played a part, as well as the new administration's stance on global warming. Luckily, the clock is hypothetical, and there is still time to do something about it.
The Doomsday Clock is now 30 seconds closer to midnight, putting the planet 2.5 symbolic minutes away from annihilation. One of the reasons the Chicago-based Bulletin of the Atomic Scientists set the clock closer to catastrophe is President Trump's statements on social media, and that is to say that he wants to expand America's nuclear arsenal, inciting fears of a new arms race. So could the world end with a bang brought on by a tweet? Here to talk about the ticking clock is Rachel Bronson, Executive Director and Publisher of the Bulletin of the Atomic Scientists. Welcome back to Chicago Tonight. Quick reminder, what is the Doomsday Clock?
The Doomsday Clock is it's a symbol. It's a clock that is moved between 2 minutes to midnight and 17 minutes to midnight, depending on whether our board thinks that the world is safer or at greater risk than it was the year before and across periods of time. We look at nuclear risk and we look at climate change.
So this is the first time you've moved the clock half a minute.
That's right.
Why did you do it?
So in the past, we've always moved it in increments of full minutes. This year, we were very concerned about two things. One was a real recklessness around rhetoric of nuclear stability and issues of nuclear might, as well as a disregard for expertise. So we were very mindful that actions speak louder than words. We usually move it a minute because of that, but we're concerned about statements and disregard of expertise.
Well, let's take a look at a couple of tweets that President Trump has issued. The first one as president. Iran has been formally put on notice for firing a ballistic missile that is, should have been thankful for the terrible deal the U.S. made with them. And this tweet back in December, before he was inaugurated, the United States must greatly strengthen and expand its nuclear capability until such time as the world comes to its senses regarding nukes. Can something as innocuous as a tweet start a nuclear arms race?
Well, that statement about needing to expand our nuclear arsenal is certainly in response to Russia expanding its and a movement around the globe to reinvest in nuclear weapons. So the tweet is part of a rhetoric that we find very disturbing, and either the president doesn't know that the U.S. is on the cusp of a $1 trillion over 30-year modernization program of our nuclear arsenal, or else he wants to increase that. Either one is very worrisome for our organization.
Some people might look at these tweets and just say it's bluster, it's theater, it's political rhetoric, nothing more.
Right. Well, the president just said when he was putting forward his Supreme Court nomination that he's a man of his word. So he believes his words matter. And we have seen other countries responding to tweets and statements that he made before he was in office. So we have seen in Iranian politics, for example, a move to putting up much more hardline candidates because they're anticipating the ripping up of the deal. And we have seen, and this is moving around the world, but in Pakistan, the Pakistani foreign minister issued a statement about Pakistan's nuclear might based on a fake news story out of Israel. So tweets are flying around and other countries are responding in an area where miscommunication and accident is so likely that we think we need to be really careful when we're talking about these issues.
To what extent have the president's cabinet selections influenced your decision to move up the clock?
Yeah, so our organization looks at technological innovation and its effect on the planet. So that's how climate change was introduced into our consideration in 2006. And we've been very worried about appointments made for the EPA and for the Secretary of Energy, among others, OMB, Office of Budget and Management. People put in who have really either questioned climate change or else who don't seem to know, in the case of Perry, about what the Secretary of Energy is really responsible for, and that's America's nuclear arsenal.
How do you expect people, the general public, to react to this move that you made? Are you concerned that it might cause people heightened anxiety, not just heightened concern? Yeah,
we worry about that a lot, and we know it's the question of, are we just causing panic? What we hope we're doing, and our intention of doing, is calling attention to these issues. And we've seen kind of around the world the response to this particular move, that there are things citizens can do. We can ask our decision makers whether we should be investing $1 trillion over 30 years in our nuclear arsenal. We can ask them what they're doing to respond to climate change. And if we can mobilize that kind of response and point out that in the past we've moved the clock away from midnight, that there's things we can do to do that, we think that it's actually a positive contribution.
Do you think that concerns about the use of nuclear power have diminished as time passes between now and their use at the end of World War II?
You know, what we've seen is real rising interest to our organization and to our website. We believe that people are starting to realize that maybe in the past they thought someone else was taking care of these issues that we care about, in a sense that maybe we need to be watching this and holding their feet to the fire a little bit more directly. And so we see rising interest even among young people. So half the people to our site are under 35 years old. We find that gratifying, in the sense of that engagement is going to be really important to pushing back the clock.
Any indication the extent to which other governments pay attention to the doomsday clock?
To the extent we know that throughout the world, people do frame questions to their leaders in terms of the doomsday clock. We've seen it on the floor of the Scottish Parliament, we've seen it at the UN, and we've seen it in articles written all around the world, so, that people will frame a conversation. To the extent to which people ask, or reporters write and say, it's 2.5 minutes, what are you doing to move it back? That's the way we see the clock being used positively.
Russia and the United States obviously play a big role in the decisions you make regarding the clock. Other countries, what are some of the other countries that also contribute to this discussion that you have?
Yeah, absolutely. The deterioration in U.S.-Russian relation was a big driver 2 years ago when we moved it from 5 to 3 minutes to midnight. But we look very closely at the investments being made around the world. Pakistan its arsenal growing faster than any other country around the world. North Korea and its tests and repeated threats around that, very disconcerting. The way the Russians include nuclear weapons in their battle plans, the investments the Chinese are making, all of those were a big contributor of moving from 5 to 3 minutes to midnight 2 years ago.
So the last time the clock was under 3 minutes to midnight was 1953, as the Cold War was sort of in the offing. Are you seeing any parallels between now and that time?
Yeah, things are very different, but of course at that time we were right on the cusp of an arms race, and very recently Mikhail Gorbachev, former leader of Russia, has said that he believes we're not only on the cusp of a major arms race, but also on the cusp it looks like we're preparing for war. And so that kind of sense that there's something changing and that the geopolitical landscape is very unstable has rings of some similarities which are very disconcerting.
Well, one of the old part of perceived wisdom once upon a time, that if the major powers had nuclear weapons, there was a balance of terror and no one would do anything, quote, stupid. Does that philosophy not hold anymore?
Well, the number of weapons that every country has far exceeds the need what you would need for that balance of terror, mutually assured destruction. So analysts on both sides have said you can continue to bring, especially the U.S. and Russian arsenals, the stockpiles down, and still have mutually assured destruction. So we're really not even at the place yet of that question. The problem, too, is we have many more countries who have them.
Rachel Bronson.